rebels and troublemakers to stand out. Marginalized with voices making us so proud. For identity in the industry, we all shout. So many women empowered making their own.
These days, we're all striving for inclusivity in the entertainment industry, but there seems to be a recurring theme that raises questions.
Why do diversity and inclusion departments so often fall short? We take a deep dive into this complex topic on today's episode. Yeah, I'm calling them out.
Trying to charge her for speaking up. Left behind speeding up. Passing not even enough. Needing no introduction, but she got a theme song.
Hello. This is the Women of Color Unite podcast, a bi-weekly podcast about navigating the entertainment industry as a woman of color. I'm Cheryl L. Bedford, founder of the nonprofit organization Women of Color Unite and the creator of the JTC list.
And I'm Manon de Reeper, vice president of Women of Color Unite. And we're so happy you're joining us for this episode of the Women of Color Unite podcast. Let's quickly recap last week's episode where we talked about the WGA writers' strike. Cheryl, you had some more thoughts that you wanted to add. And of course, since then, SAG-AFTRA has voted to authorize the strike. Any further thoughts on that?
And the DGA has a tentative agreement. Though I will say, so last week when I was talking about me getting waivers under the DGA, that was as a UPM. I realized that I didn't clarify. People probably thinking she's a director. No, it was as a unit production manager. So that was what I was referring to. And let us just say, because I got hit up by a couple of UPMs who actually aren't happy with the tentative agreement. So UPMs don't get overtime until after 16 hours. The new contract, actually, I think they lessen the hours for ADs, but not UPMs. Let's think about that for a second. So they don't get overtime until after 16 hours. Like, really? Like, wait, what? And that's a problem.
Twice a workday.
Mm-hmm. And that is a problem. And so I see UPMs keep getting thrown under the bus. I'm just saying, DGA, I see you. See, people want to know why I don't belong to guilds and unions. Now you see why. 16 hours. And I have had friends who have actually been let go at 15 hours and 45 minutes. Now think about the fact that they then have to go home, right? Drive home, try to get some sleep, get up and do it the next day. 16 hours until they hit overtime. Redheaded stepchild of the DGA. I'm just saying. So anyway, that's part of the agreement. I do see on Twitter that people are talking about not accepting the agreement. So I think it'll really boil down to really probably above the line versus below the line. Let's just be honest, right? Directors are above the line. ADs, UPMs are all below the line. So let's see how, that works out. I was sent the article about it. I have not read it. So I'm always very honest when I don't read something, but I do know about the UPMs because I've had a couple of my friends ranting to me about that because I'm also a production manager, right? So they also work as line producers as well. So it's definitely going to be interesting. So let's see what happens with the DGA and with the actors. I mean, it's always been that film was always really a director's medium and television was really a writer's medium. But the disrespect that's being shown to writers, god dang, sheesh. Anyway, so any other thoughts you have, Manon?
I'm also just really interested to see what the next steps of the actors are going to be. I think that there's certain things that, they are working on negotiating that haven't quite worked out for the writers. So I honestly, personally, I'm expecting that the actors will end up striking, but I mean, time will tell. So 30th of June, I guess, is around the time that we'll know. And then maybe, July 1st or 2nd, they might be striking too, and things may go quicker than expected. They may not. Like I think everyone has a hard time kind of predicting these things. So we'll see. But I hope that in the long term, like at least right now, people are taking good care of themselves and are being smart in this time. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Also, just a shout out to all the writers out there still on strike and all those who are joining them. But I'm still seeing all these themes. They're having a Beyonce theme. Like I'm still watching all of these themes. And again, that finding the joy in the middle of hardship is such a, I said it last week, I'll say it again, it's a very Black American thing, right? The joy that is found within all of the hardship that is going on. So I did want to say that. Also, to make a clarification, that when I was talking about healthcare, that they get the healthcare through the unions based on the amount of money that they make from their residuals. So, which is why I have friends who also are not getting their health care anymore, right? And obviously is as they get older, which is when you really need your health care. Like make this shit, make it make sense. I just don't I don't know.
I mean, I agree with you, Cheryl, and I've been following a lot of people on Instagram, especially lately. I've been a little bit more on Instagram than Twitter for some reason. Well, I do know why. Never mind. We're not going to get into that. I know why I'm no longer on Twitter, but yes, Instagram. So I've been following a lot of actors there, and there was an actor who's been actively working, is a SAG member, books about 4 shows a year, a couple commercials. Like from an outsider looking in, that sounds like you're, on the right track, you're doing well. But this person was sharing that with that, like to hit the minimum amount of money that you need to make to get your healthcare is about $25,000, if I'm remembering correctly, for SAG. With those 4 shows and the commercials, they're not even making that and are still working extra jobs to make it work. And so even to be an actively working actor, and so this is not talking A-lister, this is smaller roles on TV shows, you're still struggling, which to me is just like, that's not how it should be. I was very surprised, obviously, again, I'm not an actor, I don't know those numbers, especially in TV. So it's I think it's very much a cause worth fighting for, and especially now that, especially for the actors, artificial intelligence is also becoming more of a threat as well. So I think that there's certain things that I hope that the unions are going to be really insistent about.
I absolutely, obviously I agree with that. And I think with the DGA for UPMs, it's 30 some $1,000 a year. Somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 a year that they have to make in order to get their health care. So yeah, again, we're going back to to capitalism and the idea of working people to death and strong unions, and but I will say, I think this actually leads us into our topic regarding for this week, which is DEIA, which used to be D&I, diversity and inclusion. Then it was DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Then it was DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. Now I tend to see DEIAB, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging. There are other acronyms also out there. Those are the ones that we tend to use within the entertainment industry specifically. So that's what it means, because like anything else, right? Things become more and more inclusive.
it's been interesting working with Women of Color Unite, and obviously not as an American, getting to know this playing field, if you will. And so just also to give a little bit more context for people who are not aware of what Women of Color Unite does and how we actually interact with these departments. So we do a lot of consultancy work in this DEI space. And and we were already doing this before the pandemic. However, during the pandemic, all of a sudden, everyone and their brother wanted to talk with us. And obviously, it was on the top of mind of everyone. Everyone wanted to quote unquote do something. They wanted to quote unquote help. And all of a sudden, we were the hip people to talk with. And we hadn't really been that quote unquote hip before that. And we started taking these meetings, and we were actually really kind of interested to see where this was going to lead. And so we were having conversation after conversation, and it was endless. If I say that we were having 5-6 of these hour-long calls with departments at from Bon Appetit, who had their immense collapse over there. We were talking with smaller production companies. We were talking with studios, like, oh, please tell us, how can we be better when it comes to inclusivity and accessibility. The A hadn't even been added at that point because, whoever thinks about disabled people and including them on that as well, right? So it became added labor for us, because what we were noticing is that a lot of these companies were actually not interested in buying our consultancy services. Rather, they were having these conversations with us where we would Cheryl in particular gave them a lot of free mind pickings, and so, or brain picking, either way. And so after we had probably 100 or so of these conversations and no one had actually come through, like it would all die. They would actually, like, we realized that they were having these conversations to feel better about themselves, because they had then had a conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. They had talked with a bunch of faces that didn't look like theirs, and so they had done the work. And this was kind of an awakening, I think, for us as well, because we started seeing more and more like how these departments were navigating. And these were kind of across the board. That was also companies that did not have these types of departments yet. And you saw that every company started to have these departments, right? So more and more of these companies started to actually create their diversity department. They would hire a diversity officer.
The one thing that I will say about studios, which is why I said earlier in the teaser that I'm going to call them out. I find it really interesting that all of these companies have programs, and I'm putting that in quotes, directors programs, writers programs, accessibility programs for those who are disabled. Like I'm seeing all of these regarding all of these studios. But writers aren't strike because they're not paying people, the not paying them really what they're worth. The opportunities are limited. People are not getting promoted. You know what this is? That we should just be glad to be in the room. So I got a question for the studios. How can you on one hand have these programs and on another hand I want to pay a motherfucker? Like, huh? And I know what it is. I was recently reminded, also on Instagram, I was recently reminded that the civil rights movement, the United States of America, when they signed the Civil Rights Act, didn't do it because there was some moral awakening. They did it because they were losing standing in the world. So these programs aren't actually about helping people. Do I think some of the people who run the programs actually want to help people? Fuck yes. But can you do that within a white supremacist system? Can you do that within a white, able-bodied, male, patriarchal system? Can you actually do that? Right? So let us be very, very clear. These programs exist so that it looks good, right? Because for years, underfunded, they didn't actually track people to see if after doing these programs, there was no support afterwards, right? We've only just begun to see it since the rebellion because of the deaths of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd. And excuse me, studios, but it took the death of 3 Black people to make you actually go, oh, we should probably make sure that these people have jobs. I have friends who have done every single program and can't fucking get hired previous to the rebellion, right? For years, did them all. Disney, Universal, Warner Media, CBS, blah, 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 blah. Did them all and still couldn't fucking get hired. But they want to run around, all the people in DEI, and be like, this is what we're doing for you. Here's the other thing. And D.L. Hughley said it, if you don't want us to act like crabs in a barrel, stop putting us in a motherfucking barrel. So that's what they do. They take 5,000 people and they make us claw at each other. All of these diverse people, when white men just get hired. For all the reasons that we talked about yesterday. Not yesterday, our last podcast. God, it seems like yesterday. So I'm calling you out. All of these diversity things. And here's the other thing. 1 second. Meritocracy. You and I have discussed this ad nauseum. If it is about who has actually done the work, who has actually gotten people hired, let alone gotten people hired without causing trauma, because now there are studies that talk about all the thousands of people that did not make it in and the trauma that they have, that these programs cause, then WOCU wins. I want your money. We deserve your money. My staff deserves to be paid. Like, if it's a meritocracy, except it's not. It's about image. That's what it's about. It's about having that standing, looking like you're doing something, and having all of these diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging people on multiple podcasts, sitting on panels, talking the talk, except your companies want to act like marginalized people just should be happy to be in the room. Your companies are still acting like plantations. So what, are you the overseer? Yeah, I fucking said it. Go ahead.
So, and I'm going to get to these statistics that we found here, is that there's a recruitment company called Zippia that did a very interesting analysis on these, the demographics of chief diversity officer jobs that they provide, hiring services to. And this is not just, obviously entertainment, but just to kind of illustrate, is that the percentage of chief diversity officers by race across the United States, across industries, 76% of those are white. That is strange. Also considering in particular that 45% is male. And so if you do the math, that's a lot of white men that are in charge of diversity departments. And if they are women, a large majority is also white, because the white woman is also considered a minority. And so according to their statistics, and we'll be linking these statistics into the show notes, about 8% is Hispanic or Latino, about 8% is Asian, and then strap yourself in, Black or African American, 3.8%. And what we're seeing over and over is that people who are in these positions do not understand, in particular, the Black experience, the Black American experience. What are your thoughts on this, Cheryl?
Oh, I have lots of thoughts. Everybody strap yourself in. Okay, y'all ready? And I'm gonna start talking about names. Speaking of white men, let's talk about Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively's company. Let's talk about how Maximum Effort hit us up, picked our brains, promised donations, promised to be part of Start With 8, and fucking ghosted us. Right? Let alone the fact that they partnered with the city of Los Angeles. My fucking tax dollars went to their program. These two white millionaires. Now, I got a question for Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. Why the fuck didn't you just partner with somebody else who was already doing the work? That. Why did you need to be the face? Why did you need to start something? There are a shit ton, especially Black women already out there. You know who would have been perfect to partner with? Women of color filmmakers and Nnani Maduro. She already teaches. She already does that. So reaching out to even younger people would have been great. How about, and I know one of the reasons they picked my brain is I'm an adjunct professor. So why? Why y'all white folk need to jump into this? Why don't you just write a fucking check? Why do you have to be the face of it?
We know why.
So let's talk about Red Bull, who also ghosted us. Like all of these people who promised after picking our brains. We can even talk. Look, and I like Latasha Gillespie, who is head of diversity over at Amazon. But let us not forget that they wanted us, in order to give us money, make us partner with women in film. Nah, no. Why are you going to make us partner with this white female-led organization who hadn't done shit? Except, again, pick my brain, lie to me. The shit that they pulled. And I told them, and I'm like, you mean the people who pick my brain for 3 fucking hours? I told them what it would take to partner for Women of Color Unite. Because here's the thing. Just because you want to partner does not mean it is good for women of color. I told them what I specifically needed after a 3-hour conversation that was supposed to be an hour, went on for 3, told them what I needed, what we needed as an organization, woke up the next day and they had us plastered as one of their partner. I sent them an email and cursed them the fuck out. How dare you? You didn't bother to do any of the work and then partner with us. Tell the diversity department at Amazon this. I'm like, I'm not partnering with them. They can't be trusted. And they're like, yeah, that's because people don't think that women of color especially Black women, can handle our own money. Excuse me? Have you not read the statistics that came out in 2019? From the Ms. Foundation, women of color and girl of color run nonprofits only receive 0.5% of all grant and foundation money, yet are expected to do more and do than their well-founded counterparts. So here's the thing, DEI people, I need you to fucking read. I need you to read statistics. And I mean statistics outside of even the statistics that come out of Hollywood. I need you to read reports from the National Institute of Health. I need you to fucking read. Here's the problem. These people are HR. They are not educators. So last week we mentioned Dr. Akosua Lasane. I don't think we actually said who she is. She is our head of education. She is our head of DEIAB. I have learned so much from her. She introduced me to Dr. Cheryl L. Webb, who, by the way, I was listening to her podcast earlier this week while I was at the gym on the elliptical. Shout out to Sarah. Shout out to Akosua. These are educators. Educators need to be in charge of DEI and not HR people. Like, sit your asses down. You don't know enough. I can run circles around you. I have run circles around you. And my degrees are in filmmaking. It's just that my mama was an activist, and I don't know, Running Women of Color Unite. I read, because here's what happened. When I was in New York Film Academy, they offered me chair of diversity development. Now, let's just be very, very clear. They offered it to me because I was a Black woman and they needed somebody. And they're like, her. Also, I'd already started some programs because obviously being the daughter of an activist, you know what I did? I emailed Dr. Cheryl L. Grills, who's one of the past presidents of the National Association of Black Psychologists, I had met her when we had done Dark Girls. And so when they made me chair of diversity, I did not walk in there like, I'm a Black person. I know everything. No, I did not. My degrees were in filmmaking. Yes, my mama was an activist. My family are activists. My Mary is a well-known journalist. My Janice is Maryland State Griot. And yet I knew to actually do this position and do it well, I needed training. And it was Cheryl, Dr. Cheryl L. Grills, who sent me readings, who answered questions, sent me articles, sent me statistics, like I did the fucking work. I did the work. And what I have seen for most of these people is that they don't know shit. I said it. They don't know shit. Not only that, when Karen Horn was head of diversity over at Universal, now she is at Warner Media under David Zaslav. God love her, because we have already seen how problematic that man is. And remember, they cut the diversity program, and then she tweeted out that it was back, but they didn't call it the same thing that they had. Let's be very clear about that. So I remember meeting with Karen over at Universal, and we were talking about one of their programs, and they had like 25 spots. And she's like, oh my God, 5,000 people applied. And I looked at her and I'm like, that's not something to be happy about. 5,000 people applied. That should tell you something. That should tell you something. And when are we going to have women, right? Those with disabilities, every nationality, people of color, but that takes in a whole group of people, veterans, all fighting for 25 spots. Like D.L. Hughley said, if you don't want us to act like crabs in a barrel, stop putting us in a motherfucking barrel. And that is what these programs do. They put us all in a motherfucking barrel and make us scratch, and claw at each other. That is the one thing you will never make me do. I will never get in one of those barrels. That is what happened with Disney when I ripped up that diversity form back in 93, 94, and swore to myself that I would change things. Here's the thing. That was in 1993 and 1994. It is 30 years later. And we're still doing the same things over and over and over again. Just because there are more programs doesn't mean that they work any better. So can we stop doing the same thing over and over and over again? How about we just, I don't know, stop the hemorrhage of the 44% of women of color who leave the entertainment industry after 10 years because they don't hit a glass ceiling, they hit a concrete one. And if another person tells me that it is a pipeline problem, look, I totally get all the programs that are out there for people who can't afford film school, who may not know about other jobs within the entertainment industry, right? But can we stop acting like we're not already out there?
Yep.
And that's how I actually met who I call my little brother, Stephen Canals, the creator of Pose. It was at Twitter Spaces. And Stephen tweeted out something about having a pipeline. And I tweeted out that statistic. He said, I never knew that. Of course, people in the entertainment don't know that because nobody wants you to know that because they want to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And isn't that the definition of insanity? That is why we feel like as marginalized people, we're constantly hitting our heads against a brick wall because they keep us in that same insane loop.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the other thing. Why are there so many programs? Like, and I truly mean this because there are already Black women out there doing the work. And why do I say Black women? Because of that statistic, that 3.8%. Let us not forget that all diversity work is based on the backs of Black women starting in the 1800s. And if you don't know that, quit your goddamn job. Quit your goddamn jobs. I have talked to people and referenced the book, All the Women Are White, All the Men Are Black, Some of Us Are Brave. They don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. If you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, and we know this from that conversation that we had with Sony, and Akosawa was there, and Akosawa actually wrote a report and actually mentioned that all the women are white, all the men are blacks, but some of us are brave. I start talking about statistics, and these people don't have a fucking clue. And they're making 6-7 figures a year. They're doing these programs. They're sitting on panels. They're getting interviewed by the Hollywood Reporter. It is the same goddamn thing over and over and over again. And I, for one, am sick and goddamn tired of it because I've been in this industry 30 years.
So, speaking of DEI officers abusing their power, we'll actually be talking about that some more in an upcoming episode with a Women of Color Unite member who shares her story of how she was sexually harassed by one of them. And here's a little clip.
I was so stunned. I couldn't believe what was happening. And I tried to just kind of like not draw a lot of attention to it. I could feel every fiber of him touching me. On top of this is a complete stranger. This man is old enough to be my father, if not older. I was, to be honest, very scared and nervous because I did not want to cause harm to myself or my career before it even got started in that sector of the industry. That it was just inappropriate, to say the least.
So make sure you're subscribed to this podcast and you won't miss this episode when it drops. Cheryl, I wanted to also talk a little bit more about how the DEI departments in Hollywood, the entertainment industry overall, has become kind of another gatekeeping tools. For instance, something that I've experienced also, as I'm navigating some of these contests, the competitions, like everything that a young up and coming person of color is told that they need to do when they enter the film industry is like, go participate in this contest. If you need to be a part of these, like the most, exclusive ones, like if you're not a winner on one of those, like people will not even look at your stuff sometimes. It can get really frustrating. And so when you approach studios, certain production companies, and they're like, oh, you're Black, oh, you're an immigrant, oh, you're, Asian or whatever, they're like, great, we have a DEI department, go talk with them. And you just feel like you have been sort of sidelined somewhere. And this is what I've come to realize as well from my personal experience, but also from my work with WOCU, is that these departments actually have zero power to greenlight anything. They don't have any money. What is even the point other than being another gatekeeping tool?
You just said a lot. Okay, so let me just say this because I'm talking about my experiences with various DEI people. Do I think that all of these people got into it because they really wanted to make change? Abso-fucking-lutely. My question is always, when did you realize that you couldn't? Because these programs have been around 30, 40 years, right? When did you decide that you were going to be part of that gatekeeping? When did you decide that you were going to make all these people, well, you're going to help put them in a barrel? Like when was that moment that you decided that? And here's why I asked that question. When I was chair of diversity development at New York Film Academy, I quit my job. There were some coincidences that went down, and I was like, I cannot make the changes that I want to make within this. I quit my job. Now, and people would say, wait, you quit your job? Yes. And I was a chair and I was making very good money. But there comes that point where I was like, I don't want to work with it. This system will only let me do but so much. And I quit my job. So I know how hard it is to be making the good money, to be affecting some change, but there will always be that point. And that point is where it makes white people uncomfortable, where it makes the white supremacist system uncomfortable. So I chose not to be a gatekeeper. So when I have these conversations, I can actually talk from a very personal side. We say that everything we do at Women of Color Unite is based on statistical analysis, and it is. But within that, I have personal anecdotes where I can relate to the people who are part of DEI. And here's the thing. Power. It's power. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's power. It's the power of picking and choosing. It's power. And we are all susceptible to it. And we are all susceptible to getting that pat on the head and being told, but you're different. You're not like the rest. I personally just had an incident, and it was in 5th grade, and I'll never forget it. It was Sister Ignelia. And I was the only Black person. Like, they had group 1, group 2, and group 3. I was the only Black person in group 1. And I remember being at the board. I was, I think, diagramming a sentence. And Sister Ignelia came up to me and said, "You are not like the rest." And I said, "What?" Like, it threw me. And she said, "You're the exception to the rule." And I turned to her in all of my 5th grade bravado and said, "I am the rule. The one thing you will never make me do is separate myself from my people. Ever." That pat on the head don't mean shit to me, because my pat on the head comes from my ancestors. It don't come from you. It don't come from the white supremacist system, and it don't come from white male patriarchy. It don't come from any of that shit. It comes from my ancestors. So if I'm not doing them proud, and we all know that moment, let's not pretend that we don't know. That we don't know that moment that we become part of the system. That place where they slam the door in our face and go, "No, no, 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 no. No more, no more. This is as much as you can do." So I understand it, but I made that difficult choice. And here's the other thing. I know other people in DEI who actually have quit, started their own firms, doing their own thing, because they hit that point. So that's number one. Number two, when we talk about like all of the competitions and stuff, let us not forget, Danny, Via, and Julie, who did the transparency white paper. It's on our website. You can sign up. You can take it, about being transparent in all of these competitions, all of these screenwriting competitions. Roadmap Writers has taken it. A few others have taken the pledge. And that is, who's reading this shit?
Yep, International Screenwriters Association.
Yeah, the very first 3 were Roadmap Writers, the Writers Lab, and Sure Script. So I wanted to give them a shout out for being the first 3 to sign up for it.
So we occasionally have members of ours who come to us and present an issue that they run into. And they basically had been participating in these contests themselves. And I think the inciting incident, if you will, was that Austin Film Fest, which is one of these revered screenwriting competitions that gets a lot of credibility from a lot of people working in the industry. The notes that they had been giving who, by the way, no one knows who their readers are. What we've heard is that they're awfully underpaid or not paid at all. They tend to not have any industry experience. These people are the ones that are giving notes that will eventually determine whether or not you are, a wanted writer. And so the notes that were being given were sexist, ableist, incredibly racist, reductive, everything you can imagine. And so more and more people were sharing these experiences on social media. And basically these members took it upon themselves to actually do a poll, especially among our members. And just for your information, Women of Color Unite has over 6,000 members. So, and a large number of them are writers. And so, a lot of these people are paying to participate in these contests to get the notes. They're paying these random people that no one knows really who they are to get their notes. And so they put together a report, and the quotes they had were pretty condemning, and you can see those on the Women of Color Unite website on wokeunite.org, where the paper is easily accessible and available. And so far, there are contests that are now starting to, acquiesce to the demands, which among them are more transparency about who these readers are, to be more transparent about what these people are paid, to actually they set up a great number of guidelines to actually increase or at least promote more transparency and diversity, inclusivity, if you will. But it's a good start. Now, I would also really like to point out is that a lot of these companies that put out these contests, their bottom line is the most important thing. It is so often you can trace it back to making the money. People don't actually really care about getting you in the room to get you a manager, whatever. A lot of these contests have actually been bought up by certain companies that, do not care about the diversity angle at all. They care about your $45 that you're paying to participate in each of these. So as you are navigating these contests and you read everywhere, this is what you need to do to quote unquote make it in Hollywood, keep in mind that your dollars, you're actually voting with them as well as as a starting writer. Keep that in mind as you're navigating this stuff, especially from like the writer's perspective, is that the bottom line. And the same honestly counts for the DEI departments as well.
Yes, it's all about money. It's all about money. It's very interesting because for years, these diversity departments had no money. They had no money. They were not funded.
Do they now?
I think that they had more resources were allotted. Again, the deaths of 3 Black people. And I keep coming back to that. I keep coming back to that because let's go back to that statistic. So you had white people, then Latinx or Asian, then Latinx, then Black, followed by Indigenous. When all of this is on the deaths of 3 Black people and 3 dark-skinned Black people, which also gets into it, right? Because when we talk about police brutality, there tend to be dark-skinned. 50%, I think, have some type of disability, whether visible or invisible. So there's that. These companies are making money out the deaths of 3 Black people. That's what I said about Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. And they're like, people got money from the deaths of 3 Black people. So this money that was doled out to various people and DEI people who got it and so forth and so on, and 3.8% are Black across the country. And all of this work, all of diversity work, is based specifically on Black people, but more specifically on Black women. So when I'm holding people's feet to the fire, when I'm having these conversations, that's what spurs me. I can't, it's the deaths of 3 Black people. But we give him money to, but the city of Los Angeles and partnering with Ryan Reynolds' company. Somebody make that shit make sense.
Well, a large part of it also, I think, is the marketing angle of it. And we haven't really, I haven't checked this term, but something that we talked about a couple times that was happening during the pandemic a lot, which I called blackwashing.
Oh, God, yeah.
Which is when people do something really offensive, especially online, they get canceled or get close to canceled. Sometimes, people try to cancel, but other people are very willingly ignoring the attempts to cancel. And all of a sudden, people will start retweeting Black people's stuff all the time. All of this, oh, we're so supportive of these Black women. We're so supportive of these Black people. We're so supportive of AAPI community. Like, blackwashing in the broadest term, as in just putting people of color all over your timeline. And I think the amount of goodwill that a lot of specifically white folks working in Hollywood are trying to get through participating in or creating these types of programs is also very valuable. And again, it comes down to the money, because that goodwill and the I'm also going to mention how our Star with A program, the press would keep asking us, what are your results? What are your results? We will not publish about your program until you show us some tangible results. Yet, we'll bring up Ryan Reynolds' program again. They would happily publish about that stuff at, the inception. Even though there were no tangible results. The only tangible result there is that he had star power, right? Pre-existing star power, some sort of goodwill with the audience. Now, increased goodwill with the audience for whatever. That program, I don't know what has happened since. Where are those people? Were they treated okay on set? Do we know? Do they even care? That is my question as well.
Also, these are conversations that you and I have been having ad nauseum because of the work that WOCU does, and constantly hitting our heads against the same gatekeeping tools, if you will. So what you just talked about, and that happened with the Hollywood Reporter. So specifically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our members, because our members, when I said they weren't going to publish it and I put it out, they started getting inundated. Like they were just, our members were like, yeah, no, and started sending all the editors emails, which is why they ended up doing the story, because we absolutely have tangible results. But everything, and this is the problem with DEI, specifically within studios, specifically within these companies, is the fact that it's still that matrix, right? So they talk about the matrix of where white supremacy and white privilege, I'm just going to call it what we call it now, which is the power of whiteness. I have changed my language because it's a privilege to be raised by a Black woman. I said it. So it's not white privilege. It is actually the power of whiteness. Right? Because I personally think it was a hell of a privilege to be raised by Joan Teresa Curtis. That. So, but that where the power of whiteness and white supremacy meet, very first part of that intersection is perfectionism. So the more marginalized you are, the more perfect people expect you to be. But that includes within DEI. So Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively can go out and be like, hey, we're going to do this. Hollywood Reporter, like, they're going to do this. They're going to do this. Oh my God, they're going to do this, right? We put it out there like, yeah, we need results. We need this. We need that. We need this. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what? So even within diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging, there's still this idea that those who are running organizations like ours, and organizations that are, and I'm going to say it, specifically run by Black women, that somehow that we still need to be perfect within that. And I already said I'm not perfect. I always say that WOCU, we are the organization, we meet people where they are. We don't offer classes per se. Like if somebody says, hey, I want to learn more about line producing. Okay. Hey, I want to learn more about doing a deck. Okay. We'll throw up a online thing to teach people, so forth and so on, right? But we meet you where you are. Women of color filmmakers, Londi's group, Nnani got that shit down pat. We stay in our lanes. We're an advocacy group. We meet you where you are. If you want to learn more, there are people out there who already do that shit, who are going to have people who look like you teaching you, because that is also very important. And I will say this. I think that when I look at our mentors,
On Start With A, yes.
I think that a lot of people realize that DEI doesn't work. That's why they signed up to be mentors, right? Because they've been at these companies, right? They've been at these companies for decades. And they realized that what Gregory termed exclusion by familiarity, don't know any, don't live near any, didn't go to school with any. And so within that, they're like, how do I personally break out of this system that has pushed certain people to the margins? And I think that people within this didn't want to wait for DEI to catch up. Like, they're like, what is my personal responsibility? And I think that that's the thing, is that there are programs where all of these people can join for your personal responsibility. Your personal responsibility for working within the system, upholding a system that has pushed all these people to the margins. And of course, so it's about personal responsibility. That's one thing. Then there's corporate responsibility. Then there is the gatekeeping. And I really think it comes down to power. I think it comes down to getting that pat on the head. What's her name? Why am I drawing a blank? She's actually my council person here in Los Angeles. Nithya Raman.
Nithya?
So yeah, Nithya Raman. Who when she was head of Time's Up Entertainment. And within that article, I actually talk about our conversation, where she was talking about some program as far as getting assistance to the next level. And again, we all know the Time's Up. We all know what the fuck happened with Time's Up. But at the time, and I said to her, okay, another pipeline. I'm like, that's great. And started referencing again the 44%. And she said to me, oh, Cheryl, it's not that I don't have those conversations. It's just that, and wait for it, I want everybody strap in. These companies just don't think that you were good enough. For the handful that have made it, that the rest of us, now they can be like the producers go 92% white, right? But that 8%, whatever, they're good enough. The rest of us aren't good enough. Now, I had a visceral reaction. And my first thing out of my mouth was, have them tell that to my motherfucking face. Remember, BFA from NYU, MFA from AFI. Like that shit ain't never gonna fucking fly with me. Right? My second point to her was, and you went along with it anyway? Like, you know that they're full of shit. You know this. We're sitting here having a conversation where you know that they're full of shit. But because they wanted to fund something and you guys wanted to say that you were doing something, you just went along with it. So actually, you're part of the problem. You are not actually part of the solution. And that's what I'm here to tell you. It's not that people don't know. It's just that it works for said whatever organization, whatever company. So if they can get funded for a pipeline, right, then they can say, well, we're doing something, when in actuality, they are upholding the system, reinforcing it, and giving it a fucking stamp of approval. right? Like that.
Right.
That's exactly what happened. So can we stop with the bullshit? Like, just say it. Just say it. Just say, well, we couldn't get the funding to really do something. This is the best we can do. Say it. Because what did I say in our first episode? What did my mama say? Admit that you're wrong, because it's not like the world don't know you're wrong. Say it. Every statistic says you're wrong. Every statistic from the National Institute of Health says the damage that has been done. Say it. All the work that's been done on the backs of Black women, say it. For all of you people in diversity who are not Black, let alone Black women, say it. You're wrong. We know better now. And aren't we, when you know better, aren't you actually supposed to do better? Stop touting the fact that 5,000 people apply for, what is the Warner one? 8? Fuck you. You know the damage that is being done. And when I'm saying that, not necessarily to those like running the diversity part, I mean, fuck you, company. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you and your goddamn little program. When white men just get hired and just keep getting elevated and elevated, because why? Because he only has 3 qualifications, but you see all of his potential. But all of these marginalized people, you're going to make them scratch and claw. When most of them are much more qualified than you ever were. So, fuck you. Fuck your program. And give those grassroots leaders who are actually doing the work your money. And stop working within a white supremacist system. If you really want to do something, you could do something. You can do like I have known people to do, which is quit your job and actually go work within diversity. Here's the thing. Here's how I think it could all change. You want to know how I think how it actually could think it would change? It's hiring the Kosuas and the Sarahs of the world to run this shit. Akosua makes a very good point. She always says that Hollywood will never make up for the damage it has done to Black and brown people. Also, erasure is violence. Now, you take somebody with that mindset and put them in diversity and give them money. Now, that's the kind of person going to change some shit. I'm not saying me. And that's the other thing that people don't understand is when I never say it has to be me. There are people out there who know a damn sight more than I do. I just happen to have a platform. I just happen to have almost 6,000. You said over 6,000. Like we're right around 6,000. I don't even know where we are these days. Like we just happen to have the platform, which is why we tend to give it over to those who know more. I think about having those Black women educators run some shit. Ooh, now and fund it. So recently, actually, it was I'll just say recently because we're pre-recording this, but I had a conversation with somebody from Lindsay Horvath's office regarding diversity. You know what I said to her? I think I referenced this earlier, but you know what I said to her? I said, it really comes down to just funding the content. That's it. That's it. Fund it. It really is that simple. There are plenty of people out there who are more than ready to have their content funded. Fund it. And for the state of California, New York, and all of these other, yes, absolutely, tie diversity into tax incentives. Tie it into
like
tax
New
incentives.
Jersey, who's now doing that.
Yes, and New Jersey. Tie it into tax incentives.
No,
and
New Jersey is doing it.
Yes. And I think California and New York are following. Tie the money into, and when I say tie it in, it doesn't mean something owned. Follow me here. Doesn't mean something owned by the studios. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about creating generational wealth. Fund indie projects. Tie diversity into, at least 50% of the IP staying in the hands of that marginalized filmmaker. Here's the thing. There are a lot of things that people could do. And let me be very, very clear. All of these things I have mentioned, all of these things I've been talking about for, 2-3 years now, 3 years, 4 years, some of them 5 years, because we just hit our 5th year anniversary. Like, it's not like I haven't had these conversations over and over and over again and suggested all of this. But it's when people want to pick my brain, they're like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And I'm like, okay, so you're full of shit. Fund, right? Well, it's what we say at Women of Color: hire, fund, distribute. Hire women of color, fund their projects, let them keep 50% of that IP, and distribute it. Like, it's just putting money behind it. And let us not forget that when it comes to just Black content, they're leaving $10 billion a year on the table. So you're actually going to make money. That's why I know white trumps green. And here's the thing. All these studies have come out. Everybody in DEI can read them. And yet, you're still doing it. Or what was Netflix's last thing that they did regarding Latinx in their program? And they gave the people, $30,000 to do their short films? Okay. How about giving them 50? How about giving them 100? How, like, what? You're fucking Netflix. But they do all of these programs.
Stop the hoop jumping is what we're saying.
Yeah, and fund some shit.
Making us... Exactly. And I think we still have so much more to say about this subject specifically. There's so much more to be said. We want to talk more about the colorism herein in DEI. We want to talk more about potential solutions. However, we're already at an hour. We don't want to keep all our listeners, although we want to hear more of what you have to say, Cheryl. But this is obviously not going to be the last time we'll be talking about this subject, because it's something that touches all of the marginalized filmmakers in Hollywood, because this is the first thing that people run into. And so we are also going to be speaking with some of the people that Cheryl mentioned, among them Akosua Lisane, Dr. Akosua Lisane, who is our Director of Education at Women of Color Unite, who has so much to say about this specific topic. And so we'll definitely be talking about it more. In the meantime, though, I would love to hear from our listeners what your experiences have been with the DEI departments, whether you have any questions for us about DEI, maybe about how to navigate these departments. But yes, there is so much more still to be said.
I want to say one more thing.
Okay.
Illuminates, like,
go for it.
So long. No, there's one thing.
It is, though.
Yeah, but I want to leave people with this. I'm going to leave them with two things Dr. Jolie Proudfit said to me, who's one of our Native American Indigenous advocates, along with Carissa Valencia. And that's this. Number one, stop thinking of it as a pipeline because of the way that it is viewed within our Indigenous Native American community, right? Think of it as a braid. That will force people automatically to start thinking of it in a new way. And I want people to start thinking of that braiding people into it, as opposed to a pipeline shoving people into it, right? Like actually braiding them within the writing or the directing or whatever program that it is. And then the last thing, narrative sovereignty, nothing about us without us. Those are the two things I want to leave people with.
Perfect. Thank you, Cheryl. Well, that's it for the main part of this episode. If you're a premium subscriber, hang around or go to the separately posted hot tea episode, and particularly we will be talking about the Don't Call Me Karen event that Uber organized, and we definitely have some thoughts about that as well. So if you are a premium subscriber, which you can sign up for through Spotify, the link is posted in the show notes, you can join us for that. And if not, thank you so much for listening, and we hope that you will join us next time. If you want more, you can get more. As a premium subscriber, you get access to our Hot Tea Premium segment, as well as the video version of this podcast. You can find the Spotify subscription link in the show notes. And if you're listening through the Spotify app, be sure to cast your vote on the poll and leave a comment or question in the Q&A. The Women of Color Unite podcast is produced by Nwabata Nnani and edited by Lauren Bonett. The music is by Oh Yeah, featuring Nayuta. Subscribe to the Women of Color Unite podcast to never miss an episode. If you want to submit questions or responses to this episode, either written or a voice note, you can send them to podcast@woceunite.com. Find the show notes and transcripts for this podcast on our website, woceunite.org, where you can also learn more about Women of Color Unite and sign up to become a member for free if you haven't yet, or sign up for our monthly newsletter. Please consider making a tax-deductible donation. Donations are what enable us to create amazing programs like our #StartWith8 career development program. If you're on social media, you can follow the podcast at WOCU Podcast, and you can follow Women of Color Unite at WOCUnite.org. Follow Manon, myself, at Manon de Reeper, and Cheryl at Cheryl_CLBP.
Please stay tuned and join us for the next episode of the Women of Color Unite podcast, because we telling it like it is.
We need rebels and troublemakers to stand out, marginalized with voices making us so proud. For identity in the industry, we all shout. So many women empowered, making their own route. Like
ageism, racism, sexism,
uncovered. They get together to form a force to prove the one that ain't gotta have a child to be seen as a mother. I'm saying
all power
to the women of color. Yeah. It's just a salute to Cheryl Bedford, leading activist in the community. She's bridging the gap and bringing all women together to fight for real inclusion amongst all the diversities. Keep going.